Thank you very much for welcoming me here, Mr. Janté. Thank all of the people here for listening to me. This is a little bit too high, this microphone, for me. Well, I hope you can see me at least over the lectern. Now, where did we get the idea to organize this International Summit of Cooperatives during the International Year of Cooperatives in 2012? Well, it's fairly simple. Our president, Madame Leroux, and other presidents of large cooperatives, during an event when they were all meeting together, they realized that regularly cooperatives, people don't talk enough about the impact of cooperatives in the economy. People talk very little about their projects and their power. So the idea emerged to bring them together and to bring together the major cooperatives so that they could exchange ideas together and really make progress together. This is why we had this idea for this International Summit of Cooperatives, which will take place in October in Quebec, but also in Lévis. We'll be on both riverbanks from the 8th to the 11th of October in Quebec City. And so you see, we've written here on the slide the astonishing power of cooperatives, or the amazing power of cooperatives. When they talk about the Global 300, one of my colleagues showed the impact and the strength from an economic standpoint of cooperatives. So this is the amazing power of cooperatives. Let me just place this in context now. I'll try to use this pointer. If I can. Okay, there we go. Just to give you the context. Albin Damour, the former president of the Desjardins movement, and he's now president of the International Confederation of Popular Banks, People's Banks. Last year, when he was invited to the international conference called What Plans for Societies of Tomorrow in Quebec in 2010, he explained the real foundations that the actions of the cooperative movement should be based on. And I drew this quote from this little book. It was written by Louis Fabreau and Ernesto Molina, who are here somewhere in the room. I invite you to read this book. It's a very interesting book. It is about the context in Quebec, but it goes beyond just the Quebec context. So it's also linked to Rio Plus 20. So Mr. Damour was saying, and allow me to read this, he was saying that the plurality of the models of our capitalist environment must become the foundation for a new economic order where the cooperative business model is a counterweight as we search for new balances. Now, the word here, counterweight, I think is a major concept, a major element. Every history tells us that capitalism is realistic, but its reform becomes our responsibility. So this is also a key word. We must see the model of cooperatives as a source of inspiration. Cooperatives, but the whole model of social economy must be a source of inspiration for those who want more democracy, more human values in the way business is carried out. So this is really the background that the activities of our summit will be based on. Now, who will our guests be? Who are the hosts be? The host, of course, the Desjardins movement will be one of the hosts, but the ACI will also be another host. Why? Because the ACI represents all cooperatives in the world. It's the International Cooperative Alliance. It's a major, important organization in our opinion, and it must allow us to try to create links with all cooperatives throughout the world. The University of St. Mary's It is the headquarters of the Sobeys School of Business, which is very well recognized in Canada for its second-level program in cooperative management, a post-secondary graduate program. It trains people to become managers for cooperatives. And you know that managers didn't just automatically become a good cooperative manager. Often they discover as they go the cooperative environment, and they have to take ownership of these principles. So this type of university training is very useful. Desjardins is one of the major, it's the 6th financial group in the world and one of the major financiers of the cooperative movement in the world. And it's a cooperative movement that is really socially responsible. This is not always obvious, it's not always easy. It's a large group. But we have this preoccupation which is constant, and this is illustrated in the GRI report. I brought some USB flash drives with this report on it. If you're interested, I can distribute maybe 5 or 6 of them, and then you can share this report. But it is on the Desjardins website. Now, I was talking about St. Mary's University. Now, just before the event of the International Summit, St. Mary's will be organizing what they call Imagine 2012. Imagine 2012 is basically an event that will bring together economists from throughout the world, but also presidents of cooperatives. And the objective here of this event is to really help people move forward in terms of the economic thinking, move economic thinking towards more human, more cooperative economics. If you go to the website of our event, you will also be able to find the link to Imagine 2012 and see how it's linked. And this event we consider extremely important, and it's sort of an entry event to launch the summit. Now, the summit itself, what are the objectives? Well, of course, beyond the objectives that you see here on the screen, there is an umbrella objective, which is an overall objective to get to know each other better. All of the cooperatives will be able to come together, meet with each other, recognize our strengths, weaknesses, capacities, what progress we've made, and also to become better known, not just among ourselves, but outside of the movement. As Madame Green was saying, this is the same thing for the social economy, too. The rest of the organizations that compose social economy. Often we're not very well known. We do our little work in our own corner, and we don't meet. We only meet with each other, and we need to go further. We need to go beyond these limits and make our voice heard. And I will tell you some of the guidelines and how we're going to organize the summit. So the idea is to allow cooperative leaders to discuss current and future challenges for cooperatives, to define initiatives to encourage prosperity of cooperatives and the environment that they're working in, to set up a sphere of socio-political influence in the economic environment. And we've been repeating this over and over. It's important to have a certain influence on your social and political environment. And what we really would like is to make this summit an absolutely incontrovertible event in terms of cooperatives. We hope that things that are said at this summit will be reproduced, and that this will have a snowball effect, and that we can then meet each other again and then see how much progress we've made the next time. So what is the red thread, or the common thread? We want to get to know each other better. So we need to take stock of the situation. And what are the challenges of the cooperative movement? What is the role that we occupy in the world? What is the role that we should occupy? And the themes that we would like to discuss are economy. The economy is currently in a phase of transformation, and the recent crises have illustrated this. Some of the mutual companies and cooperatives have better weathered the crisis for humanitarian, environmental, and economic reasons. But what is the real situation? What is the role that cooperatives occupy in the world today? What is the role that they should occupy? So, first of all, we have 3 studies. One study by McKinsey on major trends and challenges of the cooperative movement. Another study by a research institute at the University of Sherbrooke, where we want to really look to see at what are the impacts of the cooperative economy throughout the world. There's another study carried out by Ipsos Educam to really look at the perception of members and the population with respect to cooperatives. When you say there's the mutualist movement and also the cooperative movement, but we need to look at the perception. So there will be 2 demonstrations. There will be a business model, a distinct and high-performing business model, an alternative to the dominant business model. What do we mean by this? Well, cooperatives and mutual insurance companies are often perceived as more attentive to performance, but they've shown financial solidity by succeeding a delicate balance between a response to the needs of their members, their type of governance, at the same time competition that they have been able to deal with. How were they able to distinguish themselves? What are some of the growth levers and development levers of these cooperatives? Again, for this aspect, there will be 2 studies that we will be looking at. One McKinsey study that really focused on development and growth of cooperatives. How did it take place? How is it produced? How did they develop? And then another study by Lloyd, which focused more on the combination of capitalization and risk. So this is an element that we want to discuss at this summit. Another major theme under this chapter of distinct and high-performing business models is that cooperatives and mutual companies have to face market competition every day. They have nevertheless been able to carve out a share for themselves. And we wonder how to ensure productivity and still comply with the cooperative values. What about their performance? What about their capacity to capitalize, to finance themselves on the markets? How are they distinct from the dominant models when they need to go and raise capital? There will be another study that will be used, a McKinsey study that will really focus on the key management processes for cooperatives. And finally, another demonstration with a human business model constantly evolving and able to face the challenges of the future. At a time of economic crisis, the current trend is to recognize the human values of companies. Information technologies are giving us a future based on the instantaneous nature of information that is not always neutral, but it is free, it circulates freely, and there's also an internalization of business. The members of cooperatives and mutual companies are not necessarily captive. People in magazines are going to see competitors. They have a freedom to purchase. And the cooperatives don't necessarily participate in associations, which are really the model and the basis of existence for cooperatives. But there is still a need for recognition. People want proximity as well. But now we can raise these questions. How can we reconcile the virtual distance and still of the members, but still meet their needs with an association that's dynamic? What levers can mutuals and cooperatives count on? How can they remain agile, innovative? How can they become leaders on their markets that are perpetually evolving and changing, but still always meeting the needs of their members and guaranteeing proximity? So it is quite complex, these challenges, but these are the realities that cooperatives must face. There's also a declaration here, which is that cooperatives have a place to occupy. As an economic giant, yes, this cooperative and mutual movement has a recognized role, but it's not very well known. There's an indispensable part for the development of their own local authorities, but often the local authorities, this is not reflected in the choice of consumers or in the choice even of the members of the cooperatives. The recognition of the distinctive elements of cooperatives is primordial. It is an advantage, a competitive advantage that is not exploited fully. This skepticism as to the real difference between cooperatives and other companies persists. The larger the cooperative is, the more people think that we're not a real cooperative, or the more they think that, okay, we are the same as other types of companies. And yet there are differences that are marked, but we don't communicate enough on these differences. And I would say the biggest challenge for cooperatives is education, raising awareness, especially when you're a huge cooperative that's been in existence for many years, where the staff there's a huge turnover and the managers change a lot. Often there's this necessity to educate, to raise awareness, to think about the cooperative values, and this has to be a constant. It's a major challenge for for the entire cooperative movement. So how can cooperatives and mutual companies increase their brand awareness, their image, and their role in the environmental, social, and political world? Now, at this level, we will have what we call a ministerial table. We want to bring together around the table representatives from governments of different countries so that they can tell us how they see the cooperative model. And this is based on a strategy of, we don't want to discuss just among cooperatives. We want the message to go home, to go outside of the cooperative movement and the social economy. We want to have ourselves heard.
So to project towards the future, to think differently, to think cooperatively, what we want to have here is a panel of thinkers who will bring us to 2030, who will allow us to project into the future, to tell her what are the major issues and challenges we must deal with. And then finally, a declaration where we would say that a commitment of leaders for sustainable prosperity. The summit will be a meeting of many major cooperatives. What we'd like to do is that we want them to realize that there are things we can do together at this level, and then to make the link with the United Nations, since 2012 has been declared as the year of cooperatives. We'd like to come back to the UN and say, and here's our declaration. It's not drafted yet. It will be a democratic exercise, and we'd like to really work on that and put the emphasis on that. So now, who are we targeting? Well, we're looking for the 300 biggest cooperative enterprises because of their economic power, but it's open to all cooperatives, whatever their sector, whether it's financial, insurance, foresting, services, all sectors will be represented. We're also targeting that there'll be probably 1,500 participants, maybe more, 125 speakers. I tell you, it's quite a challenge. I'm working with a team on that. We've also put together a team of people from different cooperatives, which is made up of national representatives in Quebec and Canada, but also international people. There are some here, in fact, Angaburi of Development International of Desjardins, Louis Fabreau, who presented the major lines of the Rio Declaration Région Montagne, who's Pauline Green, who is part of this committee. So there's a representation of 90 countries at least, and we'd like to have to project out of our usual milieu is to have the international media. Conclusion now. Now, I think you should read The Challenge of Capitalism and Capitalism, which was written by Judge and Pascal Pury, which I think is very interesting because it talks about agricultural cooperatives, but the principles in here addresses itself to all types of cooperatives. So therefore, the cooperative enterprises have advantages today to meet today's challenges, to deal with social cohesion. They have the ability to respond to their stakeholders and the communities they're in. There's a social and economic dimension to create wealth, employment as well. It contributes to improved participation of employees in their companies' activities. So we're talking here not about workers' cooperatives, but all sorts of cooperatives, personal and collective enrichment of their members and their communities. And finally, these people are truly rooted in their cooperatives and their territories. They depend on the territory. It's a back and forth swing, and they also ensure their permanence and the wealth of their communities. So that's what I'd like to conclude. Thank you very much.